Welcome to The Craft. I'm your host, May Globus. This podcast is a collection of intimate conversations on artistry, mastery, and life with talented, passionately curious creatives and entrepreneurs. Most are dear friends, some are those I've admired from afar. I hope you enjoy these conversations, this exploration of the humanity that connects all of us, as much as I do having them. Thank you for being here and for listening. Interior designer and co-host of Netflix show Restaurants on the Edge, Karin Bohn is one of those people you can't take your eyes off of. Her presence and energy is that magnetic. Her design studio House of Bohn has won numerous awards since opening in 2009, with her team working on residential and commercial projects across North America. She's also built a legion of global followers who watch her YouTube and Instagram content on entrepreneurship, travel, and design. She also happens to be one of the most intentional and reflective humans you'll come across. In this conversation, we explore her idyllic childhood in Dawson Creek, the greatest lesson her late father passed on to her, her journey into landing her Netflix show, and what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Please enjoy this conversation with the very vibrant Karin Bohn. Karin Bohn, welcome to The Craft.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm so excited to see you.
I am too. I mean, it's been probably 3-4 weeks.
Couple weeks, few weeks, yeah.
It always feels like too long, though.
It always feels like too long.
So this is our re-record because our original episode got destroyed by technology error, human error.
As it happens, and I guess it was meant to be, right?
It was.
This is going to be the conversation that the craft needs to have. So.
Yes. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yes.
I'm ready.
So I love to always connect the dots on how we met. And it was when I was a social columnist for the West Ender, and I went to an event and I met you. And I don't remember, I think...
Did we not meet before the event at a restaurant here in Yaletown?
Oh, yes. And it was through, not Julia, her sister that was doing sales for the West Ender.
Yes, that's right. And we ended up at a table together. A couple people knew each other. I can't remember how, but we were just out socially, and that's how we met. And then we kept bumping into each other. And this was like 10...
it's got to be 10, 11 years.
Yeah,
friendship.
At least.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you had Moeski Design back then.
Which I launched 12 years ago. And I've been with my husband now for 8 years, but you and I met well before that.
Before that.
Maybe at least 10 years, maybe 11, 12, could be 13 years even.
I love it. 13 years. Wow.
Right?
Yes.
Because I remember that night I was with Brett at the time.
You were.
My boyfriend at the time. And there's a few in between Brett and Chris, my husband now. So
yes.
It was many moons
friendship.
ago.
Yes. I'm very, very lucky to have you in my life. So
likewise.
I'm glad we're having this deep dive conversation.
Yeah.
So tell me about you as a child. Tell me about growing up.
Oh my gosh, growing up. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And I think it's because I've had such a craving in my life to slow down. As you know, you and I have talked about this a lot. And I grew up in the small town of Dawson Creek in northern BC, population of 12,000, like super small town, very rural. And we actually lived outside of the city. And I was fortunate enough to grow up on like 180 acres of land. And it was remote and beautiful. We were surrounded by nature. And when I think of my childhood, I would really describe it as like idyllic. It was just, it's visually very beautiful. And I mean, growing up in Dawson Creek, I didn't think that at the time. Like, you never appreciate it at the time. And my family moved to the Okanagan when I was 10. But so for the first 10 years of my life, I grew up in this very small town with my two younger sisters, my mom and dad, and we would play outside all day long. I have very few memories of being inside the house and playing. We were always outside. We had a couple of ponies. We had some chickens. We had like a pet pig at one point, some dogs. And
it's a peaceful life.
A very, very peaceful life and a very like innocent childhood. And when I
Pure.
Pure is a great word for it. Yeah. And I attribute my childhood and growing up that way to my creativity because we grew up having to use our imagination. And I remember, and not just our imagination, but also we grew up with like a stillness. You know, there wasn't a lot of, my parents weren't really big into music. The television wasn't on all the time. So there was sort of like this stillness and this peace and quiet that
Room for imagination.
And yeah, and I think that today, because it's so busy and my life is so busy and my work is so busy, I've had this yearning in the last little while to sort of reconnect with the way that I grew up, being a lot more still, and a lot more surrounded by nature.
You're craving more of that space again for imagination. Room for imagination.
Room for imagination. And I think like as is with meditation, when you can find that like center, and the only way that you can find that center is through being quiet and still, I think you can really, really get creative. Like you can really affect things. You can really manifest things from that still place. And so I definitely have been, as you know, have been craving a change in the last little while. And so I, for some reason, my childhood just pops into my head quite often, or that stillness. Or I think of my sister who's in Calgary, who has, you know, she lives on an acreage and has a number of horses. And it's kind of, it reminds me of my childhood. And I just, I love that peacefulness and that quietness.
And it's really interesting that you talk about this stillness and this peacefulness because, you know, for as long as I've known you, one of the words that I would use to describe you is driven. And, you know,
right?
it's like, it's this interesting, it's just an interesting comparison, right?
Yeah.
Like,
or this interesting like juxtaposition.
Yeah,
almost.
Exactly. And so I'd love to know more about your mom and your dad and where you think you get these qualities from.
Well, so my dad, both my parents had immigrated to Canada. My dad is German. My mom is Chinese. My dad's side of the family is very formal. A lot of doctors in the family, dentists, they all live in Germany. They speak German. Most of the time when I see them, it's if I go to Germany to go visit them. And my dad, after he went to med school, came to Canada, did his residency here, and then just decided that he was going to stay. Like he was never going to leave Canada. And he ended up going up north to work and had a practice up in Dawson Creek. My dad was a hunter, and he just really loved like the wilderness. And my dad was I would describe him as a really like competent person. And he was always building things. He built the house that we lived in. He was welding riverboats. He always had some sort of like construction project on the go. And growing up, I would watch him sometimes for hours, just mesmerized by construction. And so I think that absolutely that played a part. It was a factor into why I became an interior designer. And my dad said that if he didn't become a doctor, he probably would have become an architect. So there's definitely some parallels there for
with
sure. With design, yeah. And I was really close to my dad, and he was passed away with cancer when I was 11. So that was the whole reason why we moved from Dawson Creek. And my dad was sick for a number of years. And he didn't want my mom raising 3 young girls up north in the wilderness, basically, on her own. So that's the reason my family moved to the Okanagan. And my mom, completely opposite from my dad. I definitely feel like this is a story of like opposites attract. My mom immigrated or moved she was born in China, in Canton, so she speaks Cantonese. And my grandpa actually came to Vancouver first, and he started up shop in Chinatown, where my current office is. So moving my office to Chinatown had a little bit of like, it kind of felt like I was connecting to my roots a little bit in doing that. But my grandparents also were very traditional Chinese, so completely different backgrounds. And I often joke that like I would have Knödels, which is like a German potato dumpling with one set of grandparents at the dinner table, and I'd have chicken feet with another set of grandparents, like completely different. So my mom grew up very traditional Chinese, like you are quiet at the dinner table, you speak when spoken to, a lot more submissive than women today, for sure. My mom was predominantly a stay-at-home mom. Like she had a part-time job, but she was at home most of the time. But she really, was in support of my dad in all of his sort of crazy ventures that he was doing. And my mom, though, my dad passing away from cancer and my mom having to look after 3 girls, I admire my mom so much because of her strength and how much she was able to continue providing for the 3 of us. Like we never yearned for anything. We never, material wise, my mom had paid for all 3 of us to go to university. She really became financially savvy on her own, because she was driven and committed to taking care of us.
Right.
And so I think probably, a lot of like my strength and my loyalty comes from my mom, because like she never remarried. I don't even remember her dating ever.
So it was you guys were her number one.
We were definitely her number one. We were her number one focus. She was just completely committed to us 3. I mean, I wish that today, like she had a partner or someone to share her life with, but she does live with my youngest sister who just had her second baby and her partner. So my mom definitely has her hands full.
Right.
They're all in the same household. But yeah, her strength and her loyalty, I think I admire so much, and I definitely get that from my mom. And then my dad's sort of like free spirit and willingness to try anything and do anything, and his competency. Like my dad was just kind of one of those people who was good at anything that he tried, and he was a quick study. Like he could take on a new task really easily, and I'm the same way. And it's both like a blessing and a curse.
Because you can take on a lot.
Because you can take on a lot, and you can take on too much, for sure. Like in my own company now, it's hard for me to have people help or for me to step back. Like I'm constantly reminding myself, like you have help. People can help, because I'm just used to taking everything on, and I'm good at this. At a lot of different things.
Right. It's interesting to hear that your dad is a free spirit, because free spiritedness is not something that I would really relate with a German background.
Well,
but
exactly. And that's the whole reason he left.
Stern
And very formal. And I can attest to that for sure, because of experiences that I've had with my family where there's a certain way to lift your glass and cheers at the dinner table. Like it's very structured and formalized, just as a culture, like lots of rules to follow, which is the exact reason why my dad came to Canada, because he was like, I can't do this. Can't deal with this.
My free spirit needs to be somewhere else.
Yeah. Needs to be in the Canadian wilderness.
Yes, Dawson's Creek. I do want to talk a little bit more about your dad, and you saying that he passed away when you were 11.
Yeah.
How did you process his illness as a child?
There really was no processing when I was a child. What I realized, have come to know in my later years, like I'm 40 now, and so I had sort of a revelation at some point in my 30s where I realized that so my dad was sick for about 8 years before he passed away. my youngest sister is 3 years younger than I am, and he was diagnosed right after she was born. So my dad was terrified of bonding with a really young girl and having her lose her father. So he made the choice not to establish a bond with her, because he at the time was told that he only had about a year to live. He ended up living for 8 years, and of course they connected in her childhood. But I only say this to illustrate that she unfortunately has almost no recollection of my dad, because they spent so little time together. I, on the other hand, being the oldest, my dad is so prominent in my childhood. He spent so much time with me, and I think he was almost like determined to teach me as much as he possibly could before passing away. And even in life today, there are sort of like, events that will happen or learnings, and I will go back to something in my childhood or a time with my dad and make a connection. And it always amazes me how much your formative years as a child really impact how you operate in the world later in life.
In all ways.
In all ways. It's mind-blowing. And so, I definitely have a lot of gratitude that he really focused on imparting as much like wisdom and teaching. And I think that's why I'm also very good at just figuring things out and solving problems. Like, he was really coaching me at an early age. When I was like 6, 7, 8, 9, he would, come home with a book of riddles, and I would have to like solve these riddles, and they would be fun children's books, but that kind of taught me how to like navigate and problem solve and look at things from different angles. And I think it's actually what has made me like a really good business person.
He was preparing you for life.
Preparing me for life. Yeah. So when he passed away, unfortunately, and again, this is just a cultural thing, my mom, being Chinese, wasn't really well equipped to handle grief, wasn't really well equipped to even talk about difficult emotions and difficult feelings. And she had so much time to process, she knew that his death was coming, and they were dealing with this cancer for 8 years. So when it happened, for her, she was mentally prepared. And when I'm pretty sure when he passed away, she was like, okay, it's time I got to make this happen. So she sort of went into like, a mom mode, like provider mode. And in doing that, myself and my sisters, but I'll speak for myself, like we really didn't have any tools or opportunity to grieve. And we didn't really talk about my dad. We didn't grieve about my dad together. We didn't cry together as a family. My mom just kind of rolled up her sleeves and went on with life. So I struggled with that a lot. And being 11 when he passed away, and going right into 12, 13, like hormonal, you're hitting puberty, you're doing all of these things as a young teenager. My teenage years were like extremely, extremely difficult, and I butt heads with my mom all the time. And I was searching for ways to feel better. I was searching, eventually for ways to self-medicate. So I started experimenting with drugs really early. I partied a lot as a teenager. I lived like really, really hard early in my life.
Right.
And it was about, 18 that I ended up in a place where all of a sudden I realized I had all of this grief that I needed to deal with. And then I began a journey of processing grief at 18, 7 or 8 years later.
Right. You spent so much time with him before
he
passed, and to not be able to feel those feelings, that must have been so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. The sadness, the loss, the anger, the yearning, the longing. Yeah, it's so hard, so hard. And I mean, I think even as an adult, those feelings are hard to process. But as a kid, if you don't have a role model, or you're not given the opportunity to learn that your feelings are okay, whatever that looks like, trying to navigate how to process your feelings becomes challenging.
I know you've been on a lifelong journey since then.
Oh yeah.
Of healing, as
Yes.
like so many of us have been or going through right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to come back to this. I have one question, but I'll save it for later.
Okay, cool.
But I do want to get into how you got to do what you do in terms of interior design. What did that journey look like?
Yeah, it's funny.
Actually, before we go on, I just want to say I'm really sorry about you losing your father.
Thank you. Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Well, thank you for saying that. And, it's something that when you lose a parent, I think, especially if you're close to that parent, I mean, it affects you for your entire life. I think they say the next to losing a child, which is the most difficult thing in life, losing a parent is the second. And so definitely at that early age, yeah, and they also say about grief, which I've experienced too. It's almost like the older I've gotten, in a really weird way, also the closer I feel to my dad. Like every year that goes by, I feel closer and closer, as odd as that might sound. But yeah, I mean, I would love to know him as an adult, because at 11, my dad was still like Superman.
Right.
He was untouchable. He had no imperfections. He was, the most amazing person and man, and I just adored him. So I'm sure, you go through that part in your life when you all of a sudden you're like, oh wow,
he's not perfect.
Yeah, they're a human being. My parents are humans. They have their own quirks and shortcomings. So I'd love to know that side of him too. But yeah, but thank you for saying that.
Yeah, of course. But yes, your journey, your creative journey.
Oh my gosh. I always knew that I wanted to do something creative. Always. Like growing up in Dawson Creek and me crafting things and watching Mr. Dress Up and then trying to make the crafts after. I always knew I wanted to do something creative, and I always knew I wanted to have my own business. I had no idea when I was in high school that interior design was a profession or a career. My mom was adamant that I go to university. So even though I desperately wanted to go to a design school or fashion design or graphic design, I mean, there wasn't any of that really in Kelowna where I was growing up. And we moved to Vancouver in 2000 when I was starting university. And, I had applied to UBC and made it in, and kind of spent 5 years doing a double major just because taking courses of my most favorite things that you could in an academic landscape. And when I graduated, I literally, I think the week that I graduated, I was like, I'm not even going to my graduation. And I just packed everything in my Honda Civic hatchback, everything that I had. And I drove to Calgary, where my best friend was at the time, who I grew up with in Kelowna, moved in with her. And a few weeks later, got a job at a store called Ellipsis Design. They sold furniture, did custom furniture design, and then did in-home consultations. So that was my sort of entry to, or my introduction to interior design, really, because I was going into people's homes, and I was helping do consultations, and I was helping to pick furniture, and I really loved it.
What about it do you love?
Well, I liked that I was doing something creative, and it was new, and I had just finished this, I went into university doing honors physics and some science courses and calculus, and then and exited with like a philosophy and German studies degree, and was really like, university was a challenging time because here I was processing all of this grief from my father's death, trying to navigate what I wanted to do in life, and wasn't really doing it in the most authentic way. Like, I think had I just, put my foot down, I guess, if you can do that when you're 18, and just said, no, I'm going to fashion design, or I'm going to a design school, I probably would have had an experience at a school like that would have felt way more like vibrant and enriching, and who knows where I would have ended up. But it, like, university was weird because I just felt like I was grinding it out in a way that wasn't like satisfying.
Right. It wasn't for you.
No. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if anybody, you went to university.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it felt the same way when I first got there. I was going into, a major that wasn't really my choice until the last minute, where I decided, nope, I am not going to sciences. Yeah. I don't want to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And I went into the arts. So yeah, yes. I understand the pressure of having a parent that wants you to do a certain thing, but it's out of love.
It's out of love. It's out of love. And you know what? It was at a time when a university degree really set you up in life differently than it is today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we see so much potential in what we can do now that doesn't have to be defined by that certificate.
Exactly. So I think it was probably more that I was immersed in something creative that was really interesting and exciting to me. And I think, I was in Calgary and I had picked up painting again, which is a hobby that I did, kind of in and out of university, but I was just really flexing that creative muscle. And I think I was in Calgary for less than a year, because when you come from Vancouver, it's pretty hard to go. If you love the lifestyle that the West Coast provides, it's pretty hard to live in a place like Calgary. So very quickly I was like, no, I'm out of here. I'm going back to Vancouver. And then I enrolled in design school. And design school was interesting. I ended up being a design school dropout because I love design school, and I couldn't believe that we were talking about color theory and, like doing all of these things that were, I guess, so fun and also easy for me. And I'm a believer that the things that are easy to you or that come naturally to you are really the things that you are good at. Mm-hmm. So I just had a really strong aptitude when I was in design school, and I was like itching to get out in the world and to be working. So I kind of was doing my schooling part-time and working in the industry. And I ended up applying at the time to do a reality TV show called Design Interns, which filmed in Toronto, and landed a part on that show. So in my first year of school, I kind of left to go and film the show, and it was a reality competition series, and I made it 4 episodes and had so much fun doing it. And then when I came back to Vancouver, I was like committed to doing schooling again. And when the next semester came around, I just had a really hard time like being engaged. I really wanted to do my own thing. I was ready to work. I knew I wanted to have my own business. I was kind of ready to do it. And so I left school and started dabbling on working on my own.
And were they mostly residential projects at first, or were they?
Oh my gosh, they were so small. Like my first project, my own first project was for a friend of mine, her like 400 square foot studio apartment. And what I helped her do is like change out the floors, paint a wall, and I think I rearranged some furniture so that it looked more spacious. And like getting off the ground, I mean, people often ask me, do you have any advice for young designers? And I always say, don't do what I did and go out on your own right away. Get some time at a firm and get some experience, because there's a lot to know, and it's a very complex trade. You don't realize that going into it because we're so used to watching things like HGTV and it seems so simple, but there's actually a lot to know, and there's a lot of coordination. that you can get so much great experience at a firm, and then going out and going on your own would be much easier.
Is it a matter of learning the systems?
Yeah, like systems and, just construction and dealing with clients and vendors and pulling together a project. It's an enormous amount of work. And sometimes when I look at our projects now, just the amount of people and the amount of items that you're coordinating to execute one project, like the margin of error is so high, just statistically, that it's really easy early in your career to make a lot of mistakes. And those mistakes can be really painful. So at least if you have some experience at a firm, you're kind of learning on someone else's dime, not on your own.
Yeah. Less of a hard knock life.
Exactly.
So you had Moeski
Yes.
first.
Yes.
And then you had that for how many
I had
years?
Karin Bohn Creative first.
Oh, okay.
Before Moeski. So I had Karin Bohn Creative, and I burnt myself out really quickly. And then I went to a large engineering and architecture firm, Stantec, which there's like 400 people in their Vancouver office, and I think 10,000 people in North America. At least that's what it was at the time that I was working there. So very corporate. I worked in a cubicle. I was there for about 2 years. And while I was there, some connections that I had made while I was trying to do my own thing initially, someone asked me to come and do their condo, and someone asked me to do a small part of a restaurant. And so then I left Stantec and went out on my own again and partnered with my boyfriend at the time. And we called the firm Moeski. It was just kind of a joke. It was a spin-off of our dog's name was Mo. It was funny at the time, but I always hated the name. And then when my boyfriend and I broke up, I was like, okay, the name's got to go. He's gone, the dog's gone, the name's got to go. And so I eventually rebranded to House of Bohn.
Right.
And it's been rebranded now for, I don't know, a number of years.
Yeah, because that was 2009 that you founded it?
I launched in 2009. Yeah, 12 years ago.
And look at you now, like all of the different industries that you work in, residential, multifamily, restaurant, retail.
Yeah.
You've
all of it.
You built an empire, and you also have created quite a following around your content, your video content.
Which I love doing. I love it so much.
Yes. You and I were having this conversation last time I saw you, but one of the observations that I told you about that I made about you was that you always spoke about television and storytelling.
I always did.
Yeah, always. It was something that always came up as something that you really loved.
And I back in the day, and I think about I'm sure when I met you, and I'm sure I was like, May, I'm going to do TV one day. I really want to do TV. I'm sure you heard that for years, and so did so many people around me. And I pursued it for such a long time, and it almost got to the point where I was like, why did I tell people that I was going to do TV? Because it's not happening.
But until it did.
Until it did. And then it did in a really big way, which, what's that saying? When preparation
meets opportunity?
That's
something
luck?
like that. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So I had been pursuing television for 10 years, from the time that I started my company back in 2009. I had also been pursuing television because, remember, I did this little stint on the reality TV show when I was in school. So, and when I say pursuing television, I mean calling up producers, cold calling them and saying, hey, I'm Karin Bohn and I'm an interior designer here in Vancouver. Can we have coffee? Do you want to talk about a potential show? And people said yes all the time. I would just look them up, Google their name, Vancouver production studios, see what kind of shows they were producing, call and say, hey, is so-and-so there? Is there a producer there? And then go for coffee. And I would kind of pitch ideas it's funny because when I talk about entrepreneurship a lot on my YouTube channel and in my content. And when people ask me about building a business, I genuinely think that even with social media, there's no better way to build a business than picking up the phone or sending a cold email and like introducing yourself and cold calling. I think you can make amazing connections, but you have to have the courage to do that.
I was just going to say, it takes a lot of guts to just pick up the phone to do that.
So the weird thing, I will say this, when I was building my interior design firm and I knew I would be like, okay, I've got a cold call. And I would get ready to call like an architect or maybe a potential developer. And in the early years, I would start like sweating. My heart would start racing. I would be like, oh my God. And I would dial the phone and the phone would ring. And, I would just like, sometimes I would feel like my heart would jump out of my chest because I hated the cold call. And if I had to leave a message, I would say, oh, hi, my name is Karin Bohn, and and then I'd hang up the phone, and sometimes I'd literally be like, and like gasping for air, like so dramatic. But I found it's hard to do. But for some reason, I don't know, cold calling producers, which is what it really was, it wasn't hard for me to pick up the phone and try to connect with someone.
And probably those producers said yes, because how many people do that?
Probably. Exactly.
And they're like, okay. This person has guts.
Sure. We can meet for coffee. Yeah.
What's a coffee? And over a good idea.
Yeah.
A potential really good idea.
Yeah. And you never kind of know who you're going to meet, I think, in the TV world. So I was cold calling producers, and then I started making my own content, and I like cut my own reel, and I was sending it even to different producers in Toronto. I flew myself out to Toronto at one point to meet with a few different producers. Like, this was all self-funded, self-generated, manifested. And even though I wasn't getting any like bites, that whole process was so informative, because every time I sat down with someone, a producer, I would learn so much about the TV world and about the industry. And eventually someone called from Toronto and said, hey, we really loved meeting you a couple years ago. We loved that reel that you sent in. We'd love to sign you. Maybe we could develop a show together. And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And anyone who knows the TV world that knows that development is like a very slow process. And when you sign on to do, usually in a development agreement, usually the production company will have you on like an exclusive. So you can't talk to any other producers. You can't do anything else. But at the time, I was okay with that. And I spent, I think it was like five years consecutively where I was signed on with 6 different producers over a 5-year span, all on these hold agreements to develop some kind of design show. And they were producers out of Toronto, out of Vancouver, out of Los Angeles. One was even like E1. I mean, they're huge. They do feature films, and they have an office in Toronto and LA. And when I signed on with them, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is going to happen. It's going to happen. I just know it. Nothing happened. So when that 5 years kind of came to an end and my last contract expired and nothing was happening, I was like, okay, screw it. Forget TV. I'm having a lot of fun and getting way more momentum with my YouTube channel. Yes. I'm just going to pursue what I'm doing on YouTube. And of course, as soon as I said that, I get a phone call, and it's a Beverly Hills number. And I remember seeing it come up on my phone and thinking to myself, oh God, probably another producer. And I take the call, and the producer says, oh, we got introduced to you, and we are looking for a designer for a new show that we're doing. I probably shouldn't tell you where it's going, but I'm just going to tell you because we're short on time. It's going to Netflix. It's a travel show. We're revamping restaurants, and you'd fly around the world doing this.
You're like, yes.
Actually, because I had so much producer burnout, I was like, I don't know, send me some more info. And I went home that night, and I had a family dinner with my mom and my husband, Chris, and my sister. And when I told the story, they were like, what? Of course you would want to be doing this. Of course. So when I woke up the next morning, I was like, yeah, okay, maybe I will say yes to this. And yeah, one thing happened after the next really quickly. And I think from the call to the time that I was signed a contract and was filming was really like a short window of time. It was like 4 months or something. It was on a plane and filming. And then, it was a Netflix show. Got to fly around the world, revamp restaurants with 2 other hosts, a restaurateur and a chef, and had a blast doing it. Worked with such an amazing, talented crew who were out of Toronto. And
it was called Restaurants on the Edge.
Yeah, it's Restaurants on the Edge.
Yeah.
So
and you can still find it on Netflix.
You can still find it on Netflix. And oh my gosh, we had so much fun, and we did it at the right time because when I got home, there was I think like a 7 or 8 month period where the show was in the edit, and then the show launched, and literally the week that I was going to do a little premiere party here in Vancouver, everything shut down for COVID. So, I mean, who knows if there will ever be another season of the show. I mean, it's canceled for now because you just can't travel, can't fly a crew around the world, can't go in and out of the countries without quarantining, or, it's just too much of a liability. So we did it at the perfect time.
I wanted to ask, when you finally got into doing a full show like that, what did you learn about the process that surprised you?
Ooh, that's a great question. Well, I'll say this, because I was so, like, it's something that I wanted for such a long time. And, I always had it on my vision board, and like I said, I was doing my YouTube channel. Nothing was happening with these producers. So I started my YouTube channel. Doing that was the most amazing unintentional practice that I could have done, because I think at that point I had my YouTube channel for, I don't know, maybe 5 years or something like that. And I worked out so many kinks, meaning I knew how to take all the ums and likes out of what I was saying. I knew how to stand up straight. I knew how to do my own makeup. I knew which highlighter looked really good on my face. Just because I was making my own content, and when you make your own content, you get better and better and better. And I could go into a room, because I was doing interior design content. I did my whole townhouse renovation in North Vancouver. I filmed it all. And so I would go into a space, I would talk about a space. I learned how to talk really quickly on my feet and how to face the camera. And so when I signed on to do the Netflix show, it was like walking right on set and didn't even flinch.
Yeah.
The only thing
you were prepared.
I was totally prepared. The only thing now is that it was just a way bigger crew. There was a separate sound guy, and we'd have 3 camera guys and a drone operator, and it was just a way bigger production. But having done my own content for all of these years really set me up for success. And so I guess the learning would be from that would be trust the timing of your life. When things aren't happening, usually it's for a reason.
Yeah.
And I am so grateful it didn't happen earlier, because I was pursuing these producers when I was still branded under Moeski. It wasn't even my name, nothing. And so I went through this whole rebrand, did all of this YouTube content before I got the Netflix show. And thank God I did, because I was able to, be Karin Bohn of House of Bohn.
Yeah. Your brand was built out.
My brand was built out. Yeah. By the time I got the show. So there was definitely something divine happening there for sure.
Yeah. Divine timing, as they call it.
Divine timing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I think that with so many of these things, you watch a show and you just watch it. You don't think of all of the magic and the orchestration that goes on behind it. And I remember maybe a month ago, I had read this article that broke down the magic of the camera work and the storytelling behind the Oprah, Prince Harry, and Meghan Markle interview. And it blew me away, because there's so many things you don't consider, like where they're sitting, how they're sitting, the sound that's happening, the angles, how many cameras, like everything that I never consider when I'm watching something.
When you're just watching something. Yeah,
and
totally.
There is a lot of hard work that goes on behind some of our favorite shows and some of the most incredible storytelling, whether it's on television, like visual, YouTube, or audio.
Yeah. So much goes on behind the scenes for sure. And, you know, I think it's like, definitely. I definitely have such an appreciation. But then at the flip side too, I also have an appreciation for what you can do with one camera person too, like with my own content and what you know, so I mean, sometimes having a big production like that is amazing, but then you can also produce so much with like one person too.
Yeah, we have a lot of tools right now to do that. And today I had read this article. It was an article about Japan, and there was someone in there that they referred to that was creating content and was using this app called VHS Cam. And so today I downloaded it, and to me it was so incredible because it was free. And you can use it and create these really cool, like, vintage 80s style videos. Yeah. So we have all this technology that
VHS Cam.
We don't have.
That.
Yeah, it's really fun.
It's an app?
It's an app, yeah. Okay, you'll find it on the App Store, VHS Cam.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it'll be the first one that pops up.
So to your question about lessons learned, I just had a thought that popped into my mind. I will say another valuable lesson learned from doing the Netflix show is, have you heard of the arrival fallacy? No. Have you heard of this?
No.
So the arrival fallacy is how people, me included, you kind of believe, or you go through life thinking, once I get there, once I attain this, once I arrive at this destination, whatever that is in your head, I will be X, whatever it is. I will be happier. I will be more confident. I will be famous. I will be whatever it is for you. I think doing the Netflix show really taught me so much about the arrival fallacy. And what I mean by that is, you know, life is kind of like a series of events that ups and downs that you go through. And no matter how driven or ambitious you are, there really is no, I will get here and everything will be better.
You're just where you are.
I will get here and it will all be different, whatever that means. I think it's just a part on your journey, and you still are who you are. And does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, just like wherever you are in life, you've already arrived.
Yes, or like the journey really is the destination. If you think that there's a destination somewhere and everything is going to be different, I think that you can be really setting yourself up for disappointment.
That's really cool. I've never heard of that. I feel like I want to dig deeper into that.
In the arrival fallacy.
But I totally understand and feel what you're saying for
sure. You know, like when I find a husband, or when I get married, or when I buy that house, or when I get that new job.
That external thing.
Yeah, like that something will be different. And I think it's just, it's the arrival fallacy. Like often it isn't. And I think you have to, if you're looking for change, you need to change internally first.
Yes. Always starts with self, doesn't it?
Always starts with self.
And when you start with self, everything around you changes.
Yes.
You know, and that's definitely a lesson I've learned in my life and continuing to learn. But I feel through experience that it's true.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I wanted to ask about, you talked about how you were supposed to do the launch party for Restaurants on the Edge, and then everything stopped.
Yes.
So tell me about this year and some of the transformations that you've had because of the stop.
Totally, because of the stop. So speaking of the arrival fallacy, I kind of thought like, this is my breakout moment. And I mean, in some ways, It kind of was. Like with the show and the launch of the show, I had a bunch of press that I was planning on doing. I was going to do some press in Toronto. I was going to go down to LA and do some like TV spots. And there wasn't like the show didn't do a premiere party or anything like that. But I wanted to host my own premiere party here in Vancouver. I had a venue that I had rented. I was throwing this big event. I had a bunch of people that I had invited. And having all of that be shut down, television screeched to a halt. Like the only thing that was being broadcasted was national news, right? Local news wasn't even being broadcasted, and even morning shows, like nobody was doing morning shows. And so this whole breakout kind of moment that I had planned, this big press tour, completely canceled. And that was, you know, in the moment, I think there was so many things that were happening because at the same time, okay, now it's COVID. What do I do with my business? We're pivoting quickly. Everyone's working from home. We had clients because I was still and had always, even while I was filming the show, was still juggling, you know, upwards of like close to 20 projects. And that's sort of the average of where we usually are at. You know, we had clients that were pausing, some that were ending their like, oh my God, there was just this whole kind of panic that was happening. So this last year has been wild because it almost was like, okay, all this press and this media stuff that I was going to do is not happening now. I'm having to deal with my business and just manage my team. And I made the decision at the beginning of COVID that I wanted to keep my employees employed, and that was the most important thing. So I was doing whatever I could to manage that. And it took me a really long time to reconcile, I think, the disappointment of not having this takeoff moment. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even realize that I needed to like process that until actually quite recently. And I got to a point where I was like, fuck. Mm-hmm. It didn't happen the way that I wanted to happen. Like, fuck. And kind of let myself go there and feel that and feel the disappointment and like the anger and all of that kind of came with it that I didn't know that I needed to feel. I think I was just in like crisis mode and just, oh my God, next thing, that I didn't have the opportunity to process it. And now that I have, and I also almost didn't want to, because not having the takeoff moment almost felt like failure, if that makes sense, which is weird because now from the vantage point that I'm at now, I can say to myself, dude, you have a Netflix show.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge. And, you know, now from my vantage point, I can kind of go, okay, what's next? Like, what are we going to do? How are we going to leverage this? Where am I going to go from here? And be really intentional about the next steps, which I'm getting really, really excited about. And I have some things in the works, which I am really excited about. But it kind of took me a little while to process that before I could turn around and look at it and like call it what it is, which is still a huge accomplishment.
For sure.
And like a really great thing to have on the resume.
I have a curious question. Mm-hmm. Why did you feel like you needed a takeoff moment?
Because I think that building my business was so hard. It is and still is like the hardest thing that I am doing. Building it from scratch, getting it to the point that it is today, it was grueling. And even doing the show was grueling. There's like, hands down, you know, it's glamorous to be flying. We went to 13 different destinations, like Finland, Hong Kong, the Caribbean. So I would be away for like 9 to 10 days at a time, usually back for about, I think 4 or 5, and then on a plane again. And it sounds glamorous, and in lots of ways it is, but it was also exhausting. And, you're always in a different time zone. And I was still juggling all these projects at home. So there were times when I wouldn't be able to sleep. I would get to bed to sleep maybe like 3, 4 a.m. In the country that I was, would be up at 6 to do hair and makeup, would film for the day, come back to the hotel room, order room service or whatever. And then it would be like, say, noon back in Vancouver or whatever time it was, business hours time. And then I would be on the phone or on my computer for another 3, 4, 5 hours working with my team on design projects. And then doing it all over again. And so
that's a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot to juggle. Super exhausting. And, I think I was really craving a takeoff moment that would just sort of make everything easier. I think that's what I was hoping for. Like
to make the battle seem worth it.
To make the battle seem worth it, and to make it be like, I don't have to go out and hustle business as much anymore because I've got a Netflix show and people are calling me. Like that kind of thing. So yeah. I think that's probably the answer in a nutshell.
Yeah. It's been a year.
It's been a year.
Yeah. So you've got some new things.
It's been a couple years.
It's been a couple years. So you've got some new things on the horizon. Anything that you can share?
Yes. You know what? Very soon. So my YouTube channel is self-titled, just Karin Bohn. I have a brand new self-produced collaboration series. It is an interview series called In Good Company. And I don't have like a release date yet because we're still working through the edit, but I had filmed a few episodes. It actually started almost not quite a year ago, but quite a while ago. And this year has been, took us a long time to get it to where it is now, but we're going to be releasing the episodes in the next few weeks.
That's great.
So I'm really excited about this, and it's just like a passion project and something, well, as you know, with this podcast, like just having really cool, meaningful conversations.
Absolutely.
In Good Company focuses a lot on like the entrepreneurship side, creatives doing what they do. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about it.
So when is it launching again?
I haven't actually like set a date because I don't know. But it's going to be in the next few weeks-ish. Like call it the next 2 months.
But everyone can follow you and watch the space and find the announcements.
Yeah. So Karin Bohn on YouTube or Instagram, and you'll see it there.
Amazing.
I know. I'm so excited.
This is an update since I last saw you. So I'm very excited.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Yes.
You know those things, those projects where you're just like, oh my God, I'm like giddy over this?
Yes.
Yeah, this would be one of those projects. So
I know that feeling well.
Yes.
Well, I just have 3 questions left for you.
Cool.
So the first question is, taking it back to something you said about your teenage years, and and your tensions with your mom, after the passing of your dad, and now as an adult, looking back at your mom then, what would you say now, now that you've gone through some more life, that you really love and appreciate about her?
I love her loyalty, and I love her commitment, and I love her sacrifice. I think there's something really beautiful about sacrifice. I think that sacrifice can be painful because it means that you're giving something up. But you're giving something up for something more. And I think, you kind of learn through osmosis. And I think having watched my mom be like that kind of sacrificial person is what inadvertently how I was able to sacrifice so much when I was building my business. I've never prescribed to having it all, having it quickly, I've always, from day one of starting my business have believed in patience, and I've never wanted, like, for me, it was never an overnight thing. Like, I always knew it would take, I was in it for the long game and still am in it for the long game. And believe that it's kind of like this is an endurance. It's not a sprint. So if I were looking back, if I had the opportunity to like say something to my mom, I probably would be like, go easy on yourself. And it's okay to have fun along the way. Like, it's okay to laugh with your kids and have fun. And that's the whole point of life, right? If you're not having fun, why the hell are you doing this? And it doesn't always have to be hard. You can have fun moments. And I think the fun moments make the grind worth it.
Right. That's really lovely. The next question I have is about your dad. And you were talking about the lessons that he taught you and the way he prepared you for life. What's the greatest lesson that he taught you and left you with?
The greatest lesson is that there's 10 ways to skin a cat. And I say that because, so the year before he passed away, when we were in Kelowna, my dad was really sick. So he died of throat cancer, and he was like physically at that point very, very thin. He basically, the cancer had eaten a hole in his neck. He was having trouble with his like talking, eating. But there was a day when I had this assignment that I needed to do for school, and I had forgotten my homework at school or something like that. And so I came into the living room and I said, Mom, Dad, I need you to drive me to school because I have this assignment that's due tomorrow and I forgot everything at school. And my dad said, okay, you forgot your work at school and you're expecting us to drive you to get your work and fix this for you? No, there's 10 ways to solve this problem. Want you to go and think about this and come back with a solution. So I went to my room and I literally wrote out like 10 options. And I came back to him and I said, okay, well, I found 10 ways that this could be solved. And I just gave all the options. And I think he was just like so proud that I actually found 10 ways that he was like, we'll drive you to school. We'll get your homework. But that was such an important life lesson. And that has carried through with me or followed me. And every time I have a problem to solve, I swear to God, I will slice it as many ways as I possibly can before finding the best answer or the best solution. And I look at everything that way. And I think, again, that's what makes me a really good business person. And it's how I make my decisions is I'm always trying to look at every single side of this. And, is there a different way we can approach this? Is there maybe a better solution? Is there something we haven't thought of? And it's served me really, really well.
Well, you and I always talk about critical thought, and
yes,
that's what it takes.
And it's so important. Critical thought. Like if and that's what entrepreneurship is. That's what being creative is. It's like looking at things from a whole bunch of through different lenses.
That's what I appreciate so much about our conversations all the time is the ability to kind of like look at all these different angles and bounce them off each other and be like, hey, what do you think of this or this way?
Totally. Yeah.
So my final perspective. Yeah. Absolutely. My final question, it's the question I ask everyone, is with what you do, what is it that you want to leave behind in the world?
The word that comes to mind is inspiration. I think role models are so important, and you never know where you're going to find a role model. And so the whole reason why I do my YouTube channel is to inspire people. And I want people to see me in action. And I don't say that from a place of ego. I say that from actually a place of humility, because what I've done with my YouTube channel is just really like opened up my business, opened up my day, and I've just taken people through this journey of building a business. And in doing that, I feel like I empower people to try it on their own, to show them that it can be done. And I like to talk about the dirty, the not so clean parts of it, right? Like the grit, the grimy side of things, the tough part of it. Because there's so many people in the early days when I was starting my business where other people were doing entrepreneurial ventures, and they would be like, oh my God, it's great. It's amazing. So good. So busy. So whatever. And I was always like, this is hard. This is really hard.
Tell the truth.
I find this hard. Am I alone here? And so I think just by being really open and authentic and transparent about what I'm going through, it really inspires other people in different ways. And I think that's important. So.
Well, you have always been an inspiring friend in my life, and I'm really, really grateful to have you in it.
Oh, well, likewise.
Yes. And I can't wait to see this next chapter of yours and what you continue to create.
Yes.
And thank you for being here.
Likewise. And thank you. This has been such an amazing conversation. And
Yes,
I'm so excited about the craft.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm honored to be a guest.
Well, hopefully we can have you on again sometime.
I would love that.
Yeah.
Thanks you,
again.
May.
If you enjoyed that last conversation, be sure to check out more episodes of The Craft on Spotify and guest photo galleries on the website at wearethecraft.com. Thanks again for listening.